Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is JonHut, and today I want to show you the making of Beginning. This is my first track as a JonHut. So if you haven't listened to it yet, then I recommend you to go listen to the track and then come back to fully enjoy the experience of this tutorial. You can listen the track on the main streaming platform: Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, Deezer, etc. So with that said, let's start with the making of Beginning. Okay, so this is the final project of Beginning. First of all, let me show you a few important details about this track. Okay, so here on the project info, I just want to show you that this track is on the key G major and the BPM is 120. Here on the bottom, we can see the total time spent on it, 104 hours and 15 minutes. And this project contains 260 plugins. Now, back on the project, let me show you the harmony of this track. So this is almost the entire harmony of the track. So let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Okay, so now that we covered some project details and the harmony, let's have a look of how I made Beginning. I'm gonna start with all of the music elements and after I'm gonna show you the drums. So let's start with the main theme of the track, which is this plug number 1. So as you can see, this track is bounced to audio, and that's because I create this sound using the sequential Rev 2 synth. So let's have a listen to the plug. A beautiful, rich and warm analog plug, which to be honest is a really simple sound. So let me go to the mixer and let me disable all of the effects and let's have a listen to the sound without all of the effects. So as you can see, it's a really simple sound, but the magic comes from all of these effects that I add. So let me first disable all of the effects. Let's add one by one. The first effect on this chain is the Fault Filter Pro Q3 just to cut some low end and reduce the high end. Next, Shaperbox 3 to add a bit of noise and also a panning effect just on the high frequency. Next, I add Fragments by Arturia, which as you can see is bypassed, so is only activated in some specific moments of the track. Next, I add a Reverb Plate by Arturia. Next, I add a CLA2A and a comp tube to control the dynamic of the sound. A one-knob filter, basically a basic low-pass filter. Shaperbox 3 to add crash and drive on the mid-high frequencies. Then I add two different delays, a Freety Delay 2, which I'm using as a mono delay, and H Delay by Waves, which I'm using as a ping-pong delay. And last, a PugTech EQ just to make the plug a bit more fat. So let me press play and let me add all of these plugins. This track have two different automations, one for a low-pass filter and the second one is to activate the plugin fragments in some specific moments of the track. Next, let's have a look to the Plug 1 reverse, which basically is the same sound as the Plug 1 but with some of the notes on reverse. So basically creates a beautiful ambience that works perfectly with the Plug number 1. Let's have a listen to it. Next, let's have a look to the Plug 2, which I created using a Diva. So let's have a listen to this sound. Here on the mixer, I add to this sound a Fab Filter Pro Q3 just to clean up the low end, a Chorus June 6 to make it wider, 3 different peak controllers to automate the depth of the LFO1, the frequency of the filter, and also to control a crystallizer that I add here on the effect racks. Next, a shaper box where I'm adding a crash, drive, noise, and this fade in, fade out to avoid a clicking. Next, a crystallizer and a tremolator, a basic high-pass filter, H delay set on 18 dotted notes on ping-pong mode. And last, another Pro Q3 just to clean up a bit more the sound after all of the effects. So let's have a listen to the sound with and without all of the effects. And as you can see, this sound have 5 different automations. The first one is to control the filter depth. The second one control the LFO1 depth. The third one is just a basic high-pass filter. The fourth one is the mix knob of the crystallizer plugin. And the last automation is to control the amount of delay. So let's have a listen on this section how all of these automations affect the sound. And last on the Plucks group, let's have a look to the Plug number 3, which I made it using one more time Diva. So let's have a listen to this sound. The effects that I add to this sound are a Fab Filter Pro Q3 to clean up the low end of the track, a Chorus June 6 to make it wider, Flanger BL20 to add movement to the sound, Shaper Box 3 where I'm adding a crash, drive, a bit of noise, and the same fade in, fade out as before to avoid clicks. A basic high pass filter and H delay with the same setting as the Plug number 2. And last, I just have a pretty balance for automations. So let's have a listen without and with all of these effects. This sound have 2 different automations, one for the volume and another to control the frequency modulation to depth. So now let's have a listen to all of the plugs together. As you can see, there is quite a lot of things going on only from these 4 elements, and that's thanks to all of the automations and also to some harmony changes that I add to the plug number 2 and number 3. So as you can see, the first 16 steps of the drop, the plug 2 is just following the root note. And after these 16 steps, it's starting to add more notes following the harmony of the track. And here on the plug number 3, the first 64 steps of the drop is just following the same notes, but on the last 32 steps is adding a new harmony to the track to create variation and tension. Now let's have a look to the chords group. Let's start with the piano. So let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Here on the mixer, I add a Fab filter Pro Q3 just to clean up the low frequencies and the high frequencies of the sound. Then an OTT just to make the sound a bit more vigor. Next, H delay set on 8th dotted notes. Next, a tape Mellowfy just to make the piano sounds a bit more organic. Next, a Fruity Peak controller just to control the noise of the tape Mellowfy. And last, a Fruity Parametric EQ just to clean up the sound after all of these effects. So let's have a listen to the piano without and with all of these effects. And for the piano, I only add one automation which activates or bypass the tape Mellowfy. Let's have a look to the next instrument, OPXA by Arturia. So let's press play and let's have a listen to it. As you can listen, there is a lot of movement on this sound, which I created using the modulation section here on the Advanced tab. So basically it's controlling the frequency of the filter, the LFO rate and the amount. Here on the mixer I add 2 different saturation, Decapitator by Sound Toys and Abbey Road Saturator. Next, Pro Q3 just to clean up the sound. Next, Ozone Imager 2 just to control the width of the sound. Next, a delay using Echo Boy by Sound Toys. Next, a Fruity Parametric EQ2 just for automation's purpose. And last, a basic low-pass filter. So one more time, let's have a listen to the sound without and with the effects. This instrument have 6 different automations. The first one to control the low-pass filter. The second one to control the width of the sound. The third one is to make the sound mono. The fourth one to control the filter key track. The fifth one is to control the filter of the instrument. And the last one is to control the mix level of the parametric EQ2. The next instrument is this pad distorted. Now for this sound, I create 2 different instances of Diva. Now this is exactly the same sound, but one of them is hardly panned to the left and the other is hardly panned to the right. So let's have a listen to this sound. as you can listen, is heavily distorted. So the way how I achieve this sound is by using Echo Voice. So here on Echo Voice, the echo time is set to 0. So the only thing that is doing Echo Voice is applying this style, telephone. And I increase a lot the saturation to achieve the sound that I was looking for. And last, Pro Q3 just to clean the low frequencies of the sound. Then both of these channels, which are the same instrument, are going to this subgroup, where I'm adding a tremolator to add movement to the sound, then a Freety peak controller to control the depth modulation of tremolator, and the last, a parametric EQ, just to be sure that there is no low frequencies on this sound. So let's have a listen to it without and with all of these effects. For these instruments, I add two different automations. The first one to control the cutoff of the instrument, and the second one to control the depth of the tremolator. And last, here on the Chords group, I add another automation which controls a low-pass filter of the Chords group. Now let's have a look to the Ambience group. So let's start with the lead, which I created using Mini V by Arturia. So let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Here on the mixer, I add to the lead a parametric EQ2 to clean up the sound, Shaper Box 3 to add noise, Chorus Dimension D to make the sound a bit more wider, a tremolator to add movement to the sound, and Freety peak controller to control the depth modulation of the tremolator. So let's have a listen to the lead without and with the effects. Next, let's have a look to the Ambience 1, which I created using the free plugin Labs by Spitfire Audio. So let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Here on the mixer, I add to the Ambience 1 Valhalla Vintage Verb with the mix knob set to 100%. And last, parametric EQ2 to clean up the sound. Next, let's have a look to the Ambience 2, which I created using One More Time Labs by Spitfire Audio. So let me press play and let's have a listen to the sound. Here on the mixer, I add Shaper Box 3 to add noise, a FAB filter Pro Q3 to clean up the sound, especially some problematic frequencies, and last, a Freety balance just for automations. Next, let's have a look to the Ambience 3, which I created one more time using Labs by Spitfire Audio. So let me press play and let's have a listen to the sound. Here on the mixer, I add a parametric EQ2 to clean up the sound, Shaperbox 3 to add noise, Fragments by Arturia to add a granular delay, and a Fruity Balance just for automation. Next, let's have a look to the strings group. Now, all of these strings I created using BBC Symphony Orchestra by Spitfire Audio. So let me press play and let's have a listen to all of these strings together. Now that we covered the chords, the ambience and the string groups, let's have a listen to all of them together. Now let's have a look to another music element which is on the effects section. So here on the effects section, I add this effects guitar, which is another music element that I create using One More Time Labs by Spitfire Audio. So let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Here on the mixer, I add a flanger BL20, a phaser by Tron, Shaperbox 3 to manipulate the pan, a low-pass filter Pro Q3 to get rid of the low frequencies, and a Shaperbox one more time to manipulate the pan. So let's have a listen to the sound without and with the effects. And last, for the music elements, let's have a look to the bass group. Now on the bass group, I have 3 different bass instruments. Let's start with the main bass, which is this bass one that I create using my hardware synth Sequential Pro 3. So let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Here on the mixer, I add a Fab Filter Pro Q3 to clean up the sound, getting rid of some unnecessary low frequencies and also cutting the high frequencies. Next, a Fruity Balance for automations. Next, Abbey Road RS124, which is my favorite compressor for a bass. Next, Micro Shift to make the frequencies above 200 Hz a bit more wider. Next, L2 Ultra Maximizer to control the level of the sound. Next, a PugTech EQ just to fatten the sound. And last, 2 different Shaperbox for a sidechain, one for the kick and another for the toms. So let's have a listen to the bass without and with the effects. Now here on the bass, I add 2 different automations, one to control a low-pass filter and another to control the bass volume. But if I go to the bottom where I recorded this bass line, you can see that I create another automation which control the filter envelope amount. And I record the bass with this automation just to create tension. And last, let's have a look to the sub track. Now, this track I created using two different instances of Diva. Now, both instances are the same preset, but one of them I'm controlling the sub frequencies, and on the second one I'm controlling the medium and high frequencies. So let me press play and let's have a listen to it. So here on the mixer, I just add a Pro Q3 to each of these basses. On the sub channel of the bass, I cut all of the high frequencies. And the opposite for the high bass 2 channel, I cut all of the low frequencies. So I can have the low frequencies of this bass under control. And next, I send both of these channels to this subgroup, where I'm adding a shaper box 3 to add noise. Fab filter Pro Q3 just to shape a little bit the sound. A studio rack by Waves, where I add a multiband split and I'm making all of the frequencies under 300 Hz mono. Next, L2 Ultra Maximizer to control the levels of the bass. And last, a Freety Balance for automations. Okay, so now that we cover all of the instruments, let me go to the first section of this track and let's have a listen to all of the instruments together. Okay, so now that we cover all of the music elements, let's have a look to the drums. First of all, let's have a listen to all of the drums together. Okay, so let's start with the kick, which I create the kick using two different instruments. One for the main kick and another just for a top kick. So let's have a look to the main kick, which I created using Kick 2 by Sonic Academy. Then here on the mixer, it only have an API equalizer, which is my favorite equalizer for a kick drum. I'm reducing by 4 dBs 400 Hz and I'm reducing by 2 dBs 5K. And last, I add a shaper box with a volume shaper to shape the sound of the kick drum. So let's have a listen to the kick drum with and without these effects. And I created the top kick using FBC by FL Studio. So basically contains 16 different top kicks and every step is suiting a different top kick just to make the whole kick to feel a bit more organic. So let's have a listen to this top kick. Then here on the mixer, on the top kick, I add a Fab Filter Pro Q3 just to keep the frequencies that I want to add to the kick. And of course, a Pro Q3 in this case is on linear phase as it works as a layer for the kick drum. Then a Freety limiter to control all of the peaks of the top kick. Next, the shaper box to add noise to the top kick. And last, Valhalla Vintage Verb to add depth to the top kick. So let's have a listen to the top kick without and with all of the effects. And now let's have a listen to these two layers together. And now let's have a look to the clap and snare group. So basically I create the clap for this track using 3 different layers. So let's have a listen to each of these layers. Here on the mixer, on the clap number 1, I add a parametric EQ2 just to clean up the sound. Next, Shaper Box 3 to add noise. Next, Flanger BL20. Next, LFO Dynamic, which is a plugin that I create using Patcher, and I'm adding randomness to the sustain of the sound. And last, H delay set on 1/4 dotted. So let's have a listen to the clap 1 without and with the effects. Next, here on the clap 2, I add a Shaper Box 3 to add noise and beat crusher. Then I add another Shaper Box with a different beat crusher and drive. And last, parametric EQ2 to clean up the sound. So let's have a listen to the clap 2 without and with the effects. Next, here on the clap 3, I add a Shaper Box 3 to add noise and parametric EQ2 to clean up and shape a little bit the sound. So one more time, let's have a listen to the clap 3 without and with the effects. And last, before we jump into the next group, let's have a listen to all of the claps together. Next, let's have a look to the percussion section. Let's start with the tom. So let me press play and let's have a listen to the tom. Here on the mixer, I add to the tom a fruity sand. Now, the fruity sand, the only thing that is doing is creating a fake channel for the tom, which basically only goes as a sidechain to the bass channel, just to sidechain a specific note to the bass. Next, parametric EQ2 to get rid of some unnecessary low frequencies and high frequencies. Next, Shaper Box 3 with volume shaper to control the tail of the toms. Next, R compressor to control the dynamics of the tom. Next, H delay set on 8th dot notes just for the high frequency of the toms. Next, Shaper Box 3 one more time to control the tail of the toms and also the delay to add a bit of noise and also to add width to the delay of the toms. Next, a Flanger BL20, but here on the advanced tab, I set the high pass sidechain filter on 1300 Hz, so it doesn't affect the low frequencies of the toms at all. And last, a Pro Q3 just to get rid of this annoying frequency. Then here on the tom, I add 2 different automations, one to control the sustain or the tail of the tom and another to control the noise that I add to the tom using a Shaper Box. So let's have a listen to the toms without and with all of the effects. Next, I add this rhythmic percussion. So let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Here on the mixer, I add a parametric EQ2 just to keep a specific frequency area of the sound. Next, Shaper Box 3 to add noise. Next, another Shaper Box 3 to add a different noise. And last, a filter MS20 to create randomness with a bell filter. So let's have a listen to the percussion without and with the effects. Next, I add this tonal percussion to emphasize some specific areas of the track. So let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Here on the mixer, I add parametric EQ2 to clean up the sound, then Valhalla Vintage Verb with a huge reverb. Next is Shaper Box, where I'm adding noise, filter modulation, and pan modulation. And last, a tremolator to add rhythm to this tonal percussion. So one more time, let's have a listen to the tonal percussion without and with the effects. And last, here on the percussion group, I add this stereo percussion. So basically every first and third step on a bar, it sounds on the left, and every second and fourth step on a bar, it sounds on the right. So let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Here on the mixer, I add a parametric EQ2 to clean up the sound, an H delay to add a bit of rhythm. Next, Rep Intensity by Arturia, where I'm using the Advanced tab to control the tail of the reverb. Next, Shaper Box 3 to add noise. Next, another Shaper Box to add the same noise, but this time on reverse. And last, Panman by Sound Toys, just to control the pan of the sound. So let's have a listen to the tonal percussion without and with all of the effects. And now let's have a listen to all of the percussions together. And last, for the drums, let's have a look to the cymbals. So let's start with this hi-hat close 1. Let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Here on the mixer, I add parametric EQ2 just to clean up the sound. Next, Shaper Box 3 for a sidechain only with 50% and to add noise. Next, another Shaper Box. Now, the rhythm of this hi-hat is coming from the plug number 2. As you can see, I send it as a sidechain to this track. Now, this shape on Shaper Box, I set to 1/16. So basically, the hi-hat close 1, it follows the same rhythm as the plug number 2. Next, an LFO dynamic just to add randomness to the attack, gain, and sustain of the sound. Next, a pan man to control the pan of the sound. And last, another Shaper Box with a basic sidechain effect, but this time set to half triplets, just to add more rhythm to the hi-hat. So let's have a listen to the hi-hat 1 without and with the effects. Next, let's have a look to the hi-hat close 2. So let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Here on the mixer, I add Shaper Box 3 to add noise to the hi-hat. Next, parametric EQ2 to clean up the sound. Next, Replica XT delay to add a bit of rhythm to this hi-hat. Next, LFO dynamic to add randomness to the sustain. And last, a Freety balance and Freety peak controller just to add a bit of randomness to the pan. So let's have a listen to the hi-hat close 2 without and with the effects. Next, let's have a look to the hi-hat close 3. So let me press play and let's have a listen to it. This is just another layer to the hi-hat close 2, so there is not much to say about this one. So let's have a look to the shakers. Let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Here on the mixer, I add parametric EQ2 just to clean up the sound. Then I add a shaper box to add noise and also basic sidechain. And last, I add another shaper box following the same rhythm as the hi-hat close 1, set on half triplets. So let's have a listen to the shakers without and with the effects. Next, let's have a look to the right, so let me press play and let's have a listen to it. And last, here on the cymbals group, I add a glass, so let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Here on the mixer, I add to the glass a parametric EQ2 to get rid of the low frequencies and a peak controller just to randomize the pan of the sound. So let's have a listen to all of the cymbals together. So now I'm gonna play only the kick and I'm gonna add one by one each of these layers of drum so you can really feel what each layer is doing. Okay, so now that we cover all of the music elements and the drums, the last section that I want to show you is the effects. So let me go into the effect section and let me show you each of these effects. Okay, now that we cover all of the elements of this track, let's talk about mixing. Here on the mixer, we already saw each individual channel. So now I just want to show you the right section of the mixer, which are all of my main groups, sends, and also my master groups. One for the drums and another for the music. So let's start with the kick group. So here on the kick group, I add a Pro Q3 just to get rid of some high frequencies. Next, a Shaper Box 3 to add a bit more of noise. And last, I add a Shaper Box 3 just to shape the sound of the kick. So let's have a listen to the kick drum without and with all of these effects. Next, here on the clap and snare group, I add Shaper Box 3 to add a bit more of noise and drive on the high frequencies. Next, API compressor, which is my favorite compressor for drums. Next, a Pro Q3 just to fine-tune on the claps group. Next, a Freety limiter just to control some of the peaks of this group. And last, a Freety balance just for automation. So let's have a listen to this group without and with all of these effects. Next, here on the percussion group, I didn't add anything. Next, here on the cymbals group, I add API compressor, decapitator by Sound Toys, Pro Q3 just to get rid of some of the low frequencies due to decapitator and also to control some problematic frequencies. And last, a basic low pass filter. So let's have a listen to the cymbals without and with all of these effects. Next, here on the sub and bass group, I add a Pro Q3 just to control the 200 Hz area. Next, a Frequency limiter just to control some peaks, a basic low pass filter for automations, and a Frequency balance for automations. Next, here on the Chords group, I add a basic low pass filter and Shaper Box 3 as a basic sidechain to the kick drum. Next, here on the Plucks group, I add a Pro Q3 just to fine tune to the whole group of Plucks and Shaper Box 3 as a basic sidechain to the kick drum. And last, here on the effects group, I didn't add anything. So now let's have a look to the different sends that I have. So basically, I have a short plate reverb, a long plate reverb, and a delay. I'm using the short plate reverb for all of my drums and also all of the instruments that I want to add a reverb. Then I'm using the long reverb just for an effect, for an specific sounds. And the same for the delay send. Now here on the short plate reverb, I add a flanger BL20 just to make the reverb sound a bit more organic, and a Pro Q3 just to get rid of low and high frequencies. Here on the long plate reverb, I just add a parametric EQ2 to get rid of low and high frequencies. And here on the delay send, I add a Shaper Box 3 with a crash effect. And last, a parametric EQ2 just to get rid of low frequencies. So first, let me show you the drums without and with the reverb. And now let's have a listen to the drums and all of the music elements without and with this sense. And last, let's have a look to the drum and music channels and also to the master. So let's start with the drum bass channel. Here on the drum bass, I add an L2 Ultra Maximizer just to get rid of the peaks when the clap and snare hit together with the kick drum. Next, a DBX compressor, which I'm using as a parallel processing. Next, API compressor, as I mentioned before, this is my favorite compressor for drums. Next, SSL EQ, just to shape a little bit the drum bass. And last, another L2 Ultra Maximizer, one more time to control the peaks due to all of these effects. So let's have a listen to the drum bass without and with all of these effects. Next, here on the music bass channel, I add a filter sim only for automations. Next, a Shadow Hill mastering compressor, which I'm using both the optical and the discrete compressor, just to glue the whole group of music elements. Next, Fab Filter Pro MB, where I'm using expansion on the mid-range area. And last, Fab Filter Pro L2, where I'm applying a light limiting to the whole music group. So let's have a listen to the music bass channel without and with all of these effects. Okay, and now let's have a look to my master chain. So here on my master chain, the first thing that I add is a Fuji stereo enhancer. I'm just using it for a small automation just right before the drop. Next, a FabFilter Pro Q3 where I cut everything below 30 Hz. I also cut all of the side frequencies below 100 Hz. And I also add this dynamic point, which is a really good preset of a Pro Q3 called Mix Mode Removal 200 Hz. And last, I boost just a little bit the high frequencies of the sides. Next, SSL compressor just to glue a little bit the whole mix. Next, FabFilter Pro MB just to control the different frequencies area of the mix. Next, a studio rack just to be sure that everything below 120 Hz is mono. And last, FabFilter Pro L2 as a limiter. So now I'm just going to activate all of the plugins except the limiter so we can have a listen without and with all of this effect on the master. Okay, so now that we cover every single element of the track and the mixing, the last thing that I want to show you is the arrangement. So the arrangement basically consists in 4 different sections. The intro with 4 phrases, the drop with 6 phrases, the verse with 4 phrases, and the second drop again with 6 phrases. Now I try to add something new on each of these phrases in order to avoid repetition and to keep the attention of the listener. And I achieved that by using automations and adding little by little more elements till the track gets to the last 2 phrases where I'm almost using all of the elements. So let's have a quick look to these 2 phrases. This is a really important section of the track as is when the track reaches the climax of it. So in order to avoid muddiness, especially on the main theme of the track, which is the plug number 1, I decided to put it 1 octave above. So let's have a listen only to the plug number 1 on this section. So this little movement on the main theme of the track and together with all of the instruments little by little opening the cutoff and adding more movement definitely emphasize these last 2 phrases of the track. So now before I finish, let's have a listen to only the music elements of this section of the track. Okay, that's all for me. Hope you like the song as much as I do and hope you like and learn something from this video. If so, please share it with the world. If you have any question, please leave a comment below. Thank you very much for watching. My name is JonHut.